In the middle of the night, my husband suddenly said he had an urgent business trip to London. I smiled gently as I saw him off, then quietly placed a coin-sized GPS tracker in the most hidden corner of his suitcase. 15 minutes later, the tracker sent a notification that made my entire body freeze. My heart felt like it had stopped beating. He wasn't heading to the airport at all. He was in the exclusive gated community where my best friend lived. In that moment, my whole world collapsed. The old grandfather clock in the living room had just chimed midnight. The entire neighborhood was submerged in silence, broken only by the sound of a light drizzle against the window pane and the steady ticking of the clock. I had just finished a critical Zoom meeting with our West Coast partners, and I wearily took off my glasses, massaging my temples. A long day wrestling with numbers and contracts had left my body aching for rest. I longed to collapse onto our soft bed, into the warm embrace of my husband. Michael, my husband, was still awake. He was sitting at his desk, the soft yellow light casting shadows on his handsome, angular face. Seeing me walk in, he looked up and gave me a gentle smile, the same smile that had melted my heart for the past 5 years. "All done with work, honey? You work too hard." He stood up, walked over, and wrapped his arms around me from behind, his voice a low, concerned rumble. I leaned my head against his shoulder, inhaling his familiar scent, feeling the day's exhaustion begin to melt away. "Let me get you a glass of warm milk," I whispered. "You've been working late, too." He shook his head slightly, tightening his embrace. "No, that's okay, sweetheart. I need to tell you something." His voice suddenly faltered, a stark contrast to his usual confidence. I turned to look him in the eyes. "What is it, Michael?" He avoided my gaze, looking out the window into the pitch-black night. I have to go on a business trip, an emergency trip, right now." Each word he spoke was like a stone thrown into the calm lake of my heart. "A business trip right now? It's the middle of the night," I asked, surprised. "Yeah, the partners in London called. There's a serious issue with the contract that needs my immediate attention, in person. The earliest flight is at 2 a.m. So I have to leave for JFK right away," he explained in a rush. His tone hurried. A vague sense of unease began to creep into my mind. My company is a major corporation. A midnight call from an international partner wasn't unheard of, but Michael's behavior tonight was strange. He was always meticulous and well-prepared. Every business trip, no matter how urgent, was planned in advance. Nothing was ever this sudden. "Why so last minute? You haven't packed anything." "Let me get your suitcase ready," I said, starting toward the closet. No, don't worry about it," he said, quickly stopping me. "It's really urgent. I'll only be gone for 2 or 3 days. A carry-on is all I need. You should get some rest. You've had a long day." His refusal only deepened my suspicion. For as long as we'd been together, I had packed for every single one of his trips. He always said he loved the feeling of being cared for by his wife, loved the subtle scent of my fabric softener on his shirts. Why was he refusing now? I forced a smile. "Well, let me at least get you the new suits I had pressed yesterday. You're meeting important partners. You should look sharp." "No need. Casual is fine." He brushed off, hurrying to the closet himself and pulling out a small carry-on. He opened it and began haphazardly tossing in a few t-shirts, a pair of jeans, and some toiletries. I stood there, watching him in silence. A woman's intuition, what people call a sixth sense, was screaming inside my head that something was terribly wrong. An important international business trip with only t-shirts and jeans? Meeting partners to handle a serious contract issue dressed like he was going on vacation? The contradictions swirled in my mind. Just then, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, his expression shifted for a fraction of a second, and he quickly stepped into the bathroom, leaving the door slightly ajar. "Hello, this is Michael," I heard him say. "Yeah, I'm getting ready now." All right, stop rushing me. I'm almost done." He spoke in a hushed, suppressed whisper, but in the dead silence of the night, I heard every word clearly. Who was he talking to? What kind of business partner would speak to him with such an impatient, disrespectful tone? My heart began to pound faster. I walked over to his open suitcase. A bold, almost insane idea flashed through my mind. I remembered the birthday gift my brother, who works in tech, had given me last week, a set of tiny GPS trackers. He said I could use them for my keys or wallet in case I misplaced them. Each one was as small as a quarter and could be tracked precisely through an app on my phone. I never thought I would use one, especially not on my own husband. Our love was built on absolute trust, or at least, that's what I had believed. But tonight, that belief was shaking violently. Should I do it? I asked myself. If he's innocent, isn't this action an insult, a baseless suspicion? But what if my gut feeling is right? If I ignore it, I'll live in torment and regret. No, I couldn't. I had to know the truth. Taking advantage of the moment while he was still on the phone, I retrieved the small box from my vanity drawer with trembling hands. I opened it. The tiny black tracker lay silently on a velvet cushion. My hands were shaking, but my actions were decisive. I gently lifted the inner lining of the suitcase, placed the device in the most hidden corner where it was unlikely to be found, stuck it down securely, and smoothed the fabric back into place. The entire operation took less than 10 seconds. Just as I finished, Michael walked out of the bathroom, looking slightly flustered. "The partners are really pushing, sweetheart." "I have to go now," he said, quickly zipping up the suitcase. He came over, hugged me, and kissed my forehead gently. "Take care of yourself while I'm gone. I'll be back soon with a gift for you." His embrace was still warm, his words still sweet, but for some reason, I felt a bone-chilling coldness. I managed a weak, forced smile. "Be careful, Michael. Call me when you land." He nodded, grabbed his suitcase, and hurried out the door. The sound of the wheels clattering on the hardwood floor faded into the distance. The front door clicked shut, returning the sprawling house to a terrifying silence. I stood frozen in the middle of the room, feeling as though I had just woken from a nightmare. My name is Evelyn, and my friends always said I had it all: looks, a successful career, a perfect husband, and a happy family. This mansion, the luxury car in the driveway, this life of comfort, it was all the result of my sweat and tears, the fruits of my hard work. I had given Michael everything: a director position in my company, a life he probably never dared to dream of. I only asked for one thing in return: his faithfulness, and tonight that one thing was under a massive question mark. With trembling hands, I took out my phone and opened the tracking app my brother had installed. A small red dot appeared on the map, and it was moving. It was his car. My heart felt like it would leap out of my chest. Which way was the red dot heading? Toward JFK Airport? Or somewhere else? I held my breath, my eyes glued to the screen. The dot moved slowly, showing no sign of someone rushing to catch a 2 a.m. flight. It traveled along familiar roads, and then it turned. It turned in the complete opposite direction of the airport. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. The red dot continued its journey, entering the exclusive, gated community of Greenwich, Connecticut, a luxurious neighborhood of mansions. And then, it stopped. It stopped right in front of a particular mansion, an address I knew by heart. Number 9, Phoenix Lane, Greenwich, the home of Jessica, my best friend. Where could the story possibly go from here? Was this all a misunderstanding or a devastating truth? And what would Evelyn do next? This was only the beginning. My entire body went rigid. The phone screen was still lit, the red dot resting motionlessly at the address I knew better than my own. Mansion number 9, Phoenix Lane, Greenwich, Jessica's house. The two words best friend had never tasted so bitter and ironic. I collapsed to my knees. The expensive smartphone slipped from my trembling hand and clattered onto the cold marble floor. But I heard nothing. My ears were ringing, as if all the sound in the world had been sucked into a vacuum, leaving only the silent screams tearing through my chest. A wave of nausea churned in my stomach, and my throat was dry and raw, as if I had swallowed ashes. The air in the room suddenly felt thin, suffocating. I tried to take a deep breath, but it felt like an invisible hand was squeezing my heart, a pain so intense I couldn't breathe. Betrayal. The word drilled into my mind, sharp and merciless. But this wasn't just a simple betrayal. This was a knife in the back, no, a knife through the heart from the two people I trusted most in the world. Michael, the husband I loved with all my heart, the man to whom I had unhesitatingly given a career and a future, granting him a status he could have never achieved on his own. And Jessica, my best friend since we were in diapers, the one who had walked with me through the best years of our youth, the one I had always considered a sister. I remembered all the times Jessica came over to my house, her voice always dripping with admiration. "Evelyn, you're so lucky. You married Michael, who's handsome and adores you. I'm so jealous of you two." She would hold my hand, her eyes sparkling with sincerity, or what I had foolishly believed was sincerity. I remembered the times I confided in her about the pressures of work, and she would always comfort me. "Just focus on your career, girl. Michael's got the home front covered. He's your rock." My rock. So solid that he went straight to her house in the middle of the night under the guise of a business trip to London. The more I thought, the more my stomach twisted into knots. Sweet memories now shattered into sharp shards of glass, tearing my heart to shreds. What did I do wrong? Was I not good enough, not beautiful enough? Did I not love him enough? I had given him everything, from a directorship he never could have earned on his own, to a life of luxury he had never dared to dream of. And Jessica? I had helped her with so much. I lent her a large, interest-free loan to start her business. I introduced her to my most important clients. I had treated her like family, never holding anything back, never keeping any secrets. And this is how they repaid me? By sneaking around behind my back in a house that was probably built in part with my money? Hot tears finally began to stream down my cheeks. But I didn't sob. I bit my lip until I tasted blood, forcing the cries back down. I would not allow myself to break. I would not be weak. Crying? Begging? For what? To give those two the satisfaction? To show them how pathetic I was? Never. The immense pain slowly transformed into something else, a cold, terrifying rage. The tears stopped. My eyes became dry and sharp. I stood up and picked up the phone from the floor. The screen was still on, the red dot sitting there like a mocking insult. I stared at it, and a crazy, decisive thought flashed in my mind. They wanted to put on a show? Fine. I would give them a show more spectacular than they could ever imagine. A show with a full audience and some very unexpected guest stars. I would not go there alone. I would not storm in like some crazed, jealous wife. I would arrive with a different kind of power. The power of someone demanding justice, and not just for myself. I took a deep, steadying breath, trying to keep my voice from shaking. My fingers scrolled through my contacts, landing on a name. Someone who, at this very moment, was likely just as hurt and deceived as I was. Liam, Jessica's husband. He was a friend of mine, too, a kind, decent man who loved his wife completely. I knew this call would be cruel. It would shatter his peaceful life, dragging him into the same hell I was in. But I had no other choice. The truth had to be exposed, and those who committed the sin had to face the consequences. My hand tightened around the phone as I pressed the call button. Each ring echoed in the silent night, stretching into an eternity. I was about to hang up, thinking maybe I shouldn't do this, but then the line connected. A sleepy, surprised voice answered. "Hello? Evelyn? Why are you calling me at this hour? Is something wrong?" Hearing Liam's gentle voice, a pang of guilt shot through me, but I quickly pushed it away. I spoke, my voice as calm and clear as I could make it. "Liam, I'm so sorry to bother you this late, but I think there's something you need to see with your own eyes." Silence on the other end. I could hear his breathing, a heavy silence filled with confusion and a growing sense of dread. "What is it, Evelyn?" "You sound serious," he asked again. The sleepiness was gone from his voice, replaced by a palpable tension. I took another deep breath, choosing my words carefully. I couldn't just blurt out the ugly truth over the phone. That would be too brutal. He needed to witness it for himself. "Are you home alone? Is Jessica not there?" I asked, my tone loaded with implication. "Yeah. She said she had a reunion with some old college friends tonight. Probably had too much to drink and decided to crash at a friend's place." Liam's voice still held a trace of trust, the naive belief of a husband who had no reason to doubt his wife. Hearing him say that, my heart ached with a bitter sorrow. Jessica wasn't just deceiving me, she was deceiving the man who adored her with blatant lies. Old college friends. Right. An old college friend who was currently entertaining my husband in their own home. Liam, don't ask any questions, I interrupted. Just get dressed. Where are you? I'll come pick you up right now. Some things are better seen once than heard 100 times. The decisiveness, the command in my voice, seemed to make Liam realize the gravity of the situation. He didn't ask any more questions. After a few seconds of silence, he replied concisely, I'm at the construction site. The project's in a critical phase, so I have to be here to oversee things. Meet me at the main gate of the Hudson Yards development. I'll be waiting there. Okay. I'll be there in 15 minutes. I hung up without wasting another second. I grabbed my coat and car keys and rushed out of the house. My car sped through the night, cutting through the misty rain. The windshield wipers worked furiously, but they couldn't seem to wipe away the storm of emotions raging inside me. Anger, pain, disgust, and a touch of malicious satisfaction. I was no longer the Evelyn from an hour ago. The weak, heartbroken woman was gone. In her place was a woman with a heart of stone, on her way to deliver justice. 15 minutes later, I arrived at the meeting point. Liam was already waiting under the dim yellow light of a street lamp. He was wearing a dusty set of work clothes, his kind face etched with anxiety. He hurried over as soon as he saw my car. What's going on, Evelyn? He asked the moment he got into the passenger seat. I didn't answer. I just started the car and headed toward Greenwich. He looked at me, his eyes full of questions. Where are we going? To a place where you'll get all your answers, I said, my voice as cold as ice, my eyes fixed on the road ahead. The car fell into silence again. I could feel Liam's tension beside me. He kept looking from me to the window, his rough, calloused hands, the hands of a construction engineer, clenching and unclenching. As we got closer to Greenwich, the confusion on his face turned to dread. This is the way to my house. Why are we going here? You'll see in a minute, was my only reply. The car finally stopped at a discreet spot a few dozen yards from mansion number 9. From here, we could clearly see the warm, inviting light spilling from the master bedroom window on the second floor. My heart clenched again. I turned to Liam and shut off the engine. I opened the tracking app on my phone and held the screen in front of him. Look, I said, the red dot is still there, right at the location of the house in front of us. What is this? Liam frowned. A GPS tracker. I put it in my husband Michael's suitcase. He told me he had an urgent business trip to London tonight. Liam froze. He stared at the phone, then back at the house. A terrible connection began to form in his mind, but he still clung to a final shred of hope. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe Michael is just dropping off some work documents for Jessica. They work at the same company after all, he said, his voice trembling, trying to find a logical explanation that he himself knew was paper thin. Dropping off documents at 1 a.m? I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. I said nothing more. I took another set of keys from my purse. Among them was a spare key to mansion number 9. The key Jessica had given me long ago, saying, "My house is your house. Keep this just in case of an emergency." Well, it was an emergency, all right. I opened my car door. Let's go. Once you're inside, you'll know whether it's a coincidence or not. Liam looked at me, then at the key in my hand. The hope in his eyes died, replaced by an expression of pure agony. He said nothing, just silently opened his door and followed me. Every step we took on the deserted street toward that house felt like a step into hell. I inserted the key into the lock. The metallic click echoed dryly in the night. The door swung open silently. The living room was dark, save for the faint light coming from the top of the stairs. We tiptoed inside without a sound. And then, as we reached the bottom of the staircase, the sounds we never wanted to hear drifted down from the master bedroom upstairs. The sound of soft laughter, intimate whispers, the clinking of wine glasses. The voices of Michael and Jessica, intertwined, sweet and sickening. Liam was frozen to the spot, his entire body shaking. I saw his eyes turn red, his hands clenching into tight fists, veins popping on his arms. I knew that in another second he would lose control and charge upstairs. I quickly grabbed his arm, squeezing it hard. "Stay calm," I whispered. "Don't make a scene. We have a much better show to watch." Liam turned to me, his eyes like those of a wounded animal, filled with both pain and fury. He tried to pull his arm away, but I held on tight. "What other show, Evelyn? Her and your husband? It's obvious. I have to go up there. I have to teach them a lesson," he hissed through gritted teeth, his voice breaking with rage. I knew his anger was uncontrollable right now, but I couldn't let him act on impulse. Storming up there now, hitting them, screaming at them, then what? We become the violent, out-of-control spouses, and them? They'll play the victims. They'll cry, they'll beg, and with their acting skills, they might even turn the tables on us, making us look like the crazy, jealous ones. No, I didn't want such a cliché ending. I wanted them to pay a higher price. A more complete and utter destruction. "Liam, listen to me," I whispered, my voice close to his ear, cold and heavy. "What will you gain by going up there now? A moment of satisfaction, and then what? You'll be labeled an abusive husband, and we'll lose our advantage. Do you want your daughter to grow up hearing stories about how her father once hit her mother?" My words were like a bucket of ice water on his rage. He stopped struggling. The fury in his eyes subsided, replaced by an infinite sadness. He lowered his head, his shoulders shaking. I knew I had hit his only weakness, his little daughter. I calmly took out my phone, hit the record button, and aimed the camera toward the top of the stairs, where those disgusting sounds were still coming from. "What we need right now isn't our fists," I whispered. "It's evidence. Undeniable evidence." Liam looked up. He gave me a complex look, perhaps surprised that I could be so calm and calculating in this situation, but then he nodded. The hatred in his eyes had solidified into a cold resolve. He understood. To deal with deceitful people, you can't play by the rules of decent folk. We stood there in the darkness of the living room, silently recording the proof of our spouse's betrayal. Every laugh, every word from upstairs was like 1,000 needles stabbing our hearts. But we weren't crying anymore. Tears were no longer enough to express this pain. After recording for a sufficient length of time, I signaled to Liam. "It's time," I said. We didn't go upstairs. Instead, I walked to the smart home control panel on the wall. It was a system my own company had installed. I knew every function. I pressed a button. All the lights in the master bedroom upstairs instantly flashed on, bright as day. Immediately after, I turned the whole house audio system to maximum volume. A grand, booming symphony suddenly erupted, the sound powerful and dramatic, like a declaration of judgment. Upstairs, the sudden music and blinding light must have jolted them. I heard Jessica's terrified scream, followed by the sound of something crashing to the floor. Liam and I looked at each other, and then slowly began to walk up the stairs. We didn't need to rush. We were in control now. The bedroom door was ajar. When we reached it, the scene inside was a perfect tragicomedy. Michael and Jessica were scrambling in the most pathetic state imaginable. He was only in his boxer shorts, and she was desperately clutching a thin blanket to cover herself. Both of them were pale as ghosts, their eyes wide with terror, staring at us as if they'd seen apparitions. "Evelyn, Liam, what are you two doing here?" Jessica stammered, her voice trembling with fear. Michael just stood there, frozen, his mouth hanging open, unable to speak. He couldn't believe his perfect London business trip charade had ended like this. Liam said nothing. He just stood there, arms crossed, his icy gaze fixed on the woman cowering on the bed. His silence was more terrifying than 1,000 curses. As for me, I smiled, a gentle smile that masked utter contempt. "Hello, you two. Looks like the college reunion and the London business trip are going well." My voice was surprisingly calm. My composure seemed to help Michael snap out of his shock. He hastily grabbed his shirt from the floor and stammered an explanation. "Honey, you've misunderstood. Jessica and we were just discussing work, right, Jessica?" He turned to his accomplice for backup. Jessica, as if grabbing a lifeline, nodded frantically. "Yes, that's right, work. There were some confidential documents I needed to give Michael before his flight, so we had to meet at this hour." "Discussing work?" I raised an eyebrow. "You have to take all your clothes off and get into bed at 1 in the morning to discuss work? Since when did my company's contracts include a clause like that? My words were an invisible slap across their faces. Their clumsy lie was absurd and laughable. But in that chaotic moment, my eyes landed on something on the small coffee table in the corner of the room. It was a blue file folder. I recognized it instantly. It was the business plan for the next quarter for one of my subsidiary companies, one I personally managed, a top-secret document that only I and a few other top executives had access to. Why was it here? In Jessica's bedroom. At that moment, a truth more horrifying than infidelity flashed through my mind. This wasn't just a sordid affair driven by lust. This was a conspiracy, a carefully calculated plot aimed at me, at my career, and the masterminds were none other than my husband and my best friend. The room fell into a suffocating silence. 4 people, 4 different states of mind, but only 2 were trembling with guilt. Michael and Jessica looked at me, their eyes no longer just filled with the fear of being caught in an affair, but with the panic of conspirators whose plot had been exposed. They knew I had seen the file. They knew their show was over, and the curtain had fallen in the most unexpected way possible. That file. Why is it here? I asked, my voice no longer mocking, only chillingly cold as I pointed to the blue folder on the table. Jessica flinched, pulling the blanket tighter around herself as if that could hide her guilt. What? What file? I don't know, she stammered. Michael also shook his head frantically. I must have brought it by mistake. I was planning to read it on the plane. By mistake? I scoffed. You mistakenly brought a top-secret business plan from my company to your mistress's house to discuss work? Do you think I'm an idiot? I didn't give them a chance to invent any more lies. I turned to Liam, who had been silent like a statue this whole time. Liam, would you mind keeping them here for a moment? I need to collect some misplaced company property. Liam didn't speak, just gave a slight nod. He walked over and stood blocking the doorway. His tall frame was like a solid wall, cutting off any chance of escape for the 2 traitors. I calmly walked to the coffee table and picked up the file. I quickly flipped through the pages. It was all there, the detailed plan for a new product launch, a project I had poured my heart and soul into for the past 6 months. And clipped neatly at the back was something that should never have been there. A detailed price quote from one of our direct competitors. Everything was crystal clear. They hadn't just stolen my documents. They were planning to sell my company's confidential information to a rival. This was no longer just about emotional betrayal. This was a criminal act, an act that could push my company into a dire situation. The rage inside me boiled over. I had been feeding a snake in my own house, and it had turned and bitten me with a fatal venom. I said nothing more. I took out my phone and calmly photographed every page of the document, including the competitor's price quote. I also made sure to take pictures of the chaotic scene in the room, capturing the pathetic state of my husband and my best friend. Every photo was an undeniable piece of evidence. "What are you doing, Evelyn?" Michael asked, his voice trembling with fear. "What needs to be done?" I replied flatly, my fingers still clicking away. After I had gathered enough evidence, I put my phone and the file back in my purse. I glanced one last time at the 2 people cowering on the bed and in the corner. They looked pathetic and pitiful, but I felt not an ounce of sympathy. "Liam, let's go," I said, my voice completely composed. "Staying here any longer will only dirty our eyes." Liam nodded. He stepped aside to let me pass. Before leaving the room, I paused at the threshold and looked back at Michael one last time. He was staring at me, his eyes pleading and desperate. Perhaps he was hoping I would cry, scream, give him a chance to explain or beg. But I didn't. I just looked at him with the cold, distant gaze of a stranger. "Oh, and Michael," I said, my voice light as air, "that strategic partnership meeting on Monday morning? You don't need to attend. I'll have someone replace you." Then, without waiting for his reaction, I turned and walked away. I knew how devastating my words were. That meeting was the biggest opportunity of his career, a project he had been pursuing for a year. Being removed from it wasn't just a punishment, it was a declaration. His power in the company, the status I had given him, was, from this moment on, officially terminated. Liam and I left that house in silence, leaving behind a mess of chaos and 2 traitors drowning in panic and despair. In the car, Liam said nothing, just slammed his fist into the dashboard, the sound a dull, hollow thud. I knew he was in pain, the pain of a man cheated on and deceived by the wife he loved. But unlike his explosive anger, I felt a frightening calm. The storm inside me had passed, leaving a cold, quiet void. I didn't feel pain anymore. Instead, I felt disgust and a fierce determination to get justice. My car sped into the night, not to run away, but to begin a war. A war I knew would be brutal. But I was determined to be the victor. The first warning shot had been fired, but that was just the opening act. The main performance, the true destruction, was yet to come. My car pulled up in front of one of the most luxurious hotels in Manhattan. I wasn't going home. The sprawling mansion now felt like nothing more than a cold, gilded cage filled with fake memories. I needed a sanctuary, a war room where I could calmly reassess and plan my next moves. Liam drove me to the hotel entrance. Before I got out, he looked at me, his voice hoarse. "Evelyn, what are you going to do now? What needs to be done?" I replied, my gaze firm. "I will not let them get away with this. Never. Is there anything I can do to help?" he asked hesitantly. I looked at him and saw the exhaustion and pain in his eyes. He was a victim, too. "You should go home and get some rest," I said, my tone softening slightly. "You need time to process this, too. This isn't something that can be solved overnight. I'll call you when I need you." Liam nodded. He didn't say anything else, just watched silently as I walked into the hotel. I checked into a penthouse suite on the top floor, with a panoramic view of the city at night. Standing before the massive window, looking down at the glittering lights like a river of stars, my heart felt strangely empty. I had stood here once before with Michael, on our wedding anniversary. He had hugged me from behind and whispered that he would love me forever, that I was the brightest star in his life. All lies. Those sweet words now echoed in my head like a bitter mockery. I didn't let myself wallow in sorrow. I took the blue file out of my purse and spread the documents across the large desk. I turned on my laptop and plugged in the USB drive containing the photos I had just taken. The screen lit up, showing the pathetic images of my husband and my best friend. But I didn't look at them. My eyes were glued to the numbers, the plans in the file. My intuition told me that stealing this document wasn't just about selling it to a competitor. There had to be a bigger, more sophisticated scheme behind it. If they only wanted to sell information, they could have just taken photos. Taking the entire original file meant they needed it for something else. But what? I started to think, connecting the dots. Jessica. Who was she? She owned a small event planning company. Her business had been booming lately, winning many large contracts. I had been happy for my friend's success, even introducing her to a few clients. But thinking back now, was that success really due to her talent, or was it with the help of someone else, and that someone else could only be Michael? As the director of business development at my corporation, he had the authority to approve budgets for numerous marketing and event projects. A horrifying thought flashed through my mind. Could it be? Had they been using my company's money to enrich Jessica's company? Had they been colluding to systematically siphon funds from my corporation? The more I thought, the colder I felt. This betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was a fatal stab in the back to my career and my finances. They wanted to take everything I had worked so hard to build. I immediately called Maya, my most trusted executive assistant. Maya was smart, efficient, and fiercely loyal. Even though it was nearly 3 a.m., she answered instantly. "Miss Hayes, is everything all right?" Her voice was laced with concern. "Maya, I'm sorry to call you at this hour, but I need your help with something extremely important, and it must be kept absolutely confidential," I said, my voice firm. "I need you to go to the office right now. Use my emergency access code to get into the archives. Find and copy every single file, contract, and payment voucher related to Jessica Moore's event company, Royal Events, from the last 2 years. Every single piece of paper. Once you have the copies, encrypt the files and send them to my private email. No one can know about this, especially not Director Michael Hayes." Maya was silent for a moment. She was smart enough to know this was not a normal work request, but she didn't ask questions. "Yes, ma'am, I understand. I'm on my way," she replied decisively. After hanging up, I sat in front of my laptop, my heart pounding. I was waiting for the verdict on my marriage and the friendship I had once cherished. About an hour later, Maya's email arrived. The file was securely encrypted. With trembling hands, I typed in the password. A long list of contracts appeared on the screen. My eyes scanned the numbers. Contract for the company's anniversary gala, $2 million. Contract for the annual client conference, $1.5 million. Contract for a new product launch campaign, $3 million. A series of contracts with astronomical figures. I knew the actual costs for these events. They couldn't possibly be this high. They had inflated the costs, bloating the budgets to 3 or 4 times the real amount. And the final signature of approval on all these absurd contracts belonged to none other than Michael. I scrolled down to the payment vouchers. The money was transferred out, then withdrawn in cash or moved to anonymous personal accounts, a sophisticated money laundering network. A quick estimate showed that over 2 years, they had siphoned nearly $10 million from my company. $10 million. The number made it hard to breathe. That was the sweat, the effort, the intellect of myself and thousands of my employees, and it had been secretly stolen by the 2 people I trusted most to build their own fake empire of wealth. So that was it. Jessica's new sports car, the mansion she had just bought, the extravagant European vacations she flaunted on social media, all of it was paid for with my money. The rage erupted inside me, burning away every other emotion. I hadn't just been cheated on. I had been turned into a cash cow for them to milk dry. A fool who had been led by the nose for 2 years. I started to laugh. A wild, crazed laugh that echoed through the luxurious hotel suite. They thought they were so clever? They thought I would never find out? Fine. If they wanted to play a high-stakes game, I would play with them. And I wouldn't just get my $10 million back. I would make them pay back everything, principal and interest, at a price they could never have imagined. The devastating truth about Michael and Jessica's financial conspiracy was like a potent poison, but instead of killing me, it made me stronger and more determined than ever. The emotional pain was shoved aside, replaced by the cold fury of a businesswoman betrayed by her closest confidants. There was no more time for tears or self-pity. I had to act, quickly and decisively. The next morning, I called Liam. He answered immediately, his voice still tired and hoarse. He clearly hadn't slept either. "Evelyn, are you okay?" "I'm fine," I replied curtly. "Where are you? We need to meet. I have something to show you." We met at a quiet bookstore cafe, a place private enough for our conversation. Liam arrived looking haggard. His eyes were dark and sunken, and he was still wearing the same work clothes from the night before. He must have wandered all night without going home. He sat down and ordered a black coffee, no sugar. Silence hung between us. I didn't say anything, just opened my laptop and turned the screen toward him. On it was the spreadsheet I had spent all night compiling, a detailed breakdown of the contracts, the flow of money in and out, the shell accounts. At the bottom was a final, glaring red number, $9.7 million. Liam stared at the numbers, his expression shifting from surprise to shock, and finally, to horror. He wasn't a fool. He was an engineer, a man who worked with numbers and blueprints. He understood exactly what this spreadsheet meant. What is this?" he stammered, his voice shaking. "This," I replied, my voice like ice, "is what your wife and my husband call success. This is the money they have stolen from my company over the past 2 years. This is the reason for the sudden prosperity of royal events and your wife's personal wealth." Liam sagged back in his chair, all the strength seeming to drain from his body. He couldn't believe that the wife he adored, the woman whose cleverness and drive he had always been so proud of, was a fraud, a parasite sucking the lifeblood from her own best friend. This truth was even crueler than the affair. An affair could be a moment of weakness, an emotional lapse. But this conspiracy required calculation, cold-bloodedness, and a soul that was utterly rotten. Suddenly, Liam seemed to remember something. He quickly opened his old leather briefcase and pulled out a stack of bank statements. "Evelyn, look at this," he said, pushing the papers toward me. "This is the statement for our joint savings account. Jessica said it was a college fund for our daughter, but yesterday, after I left your place, I checked. The entire balance, almost $200,000, was withdrawn by her 3 months ago." He pointed to a large wire transfer. The money was sent to a company with a strange name, MJ Equity LLC. MJ Equity, I murmured the name, the combination of Michael and Jessica. So they weren't just stealing from my company, they were quietly building their own empire, a shell corporation to legitimize the dirty money they were making. They were preparing for an escape, a plan to run away after they had sucked me completely dry. Their audacity and cruelty were beyond anything I could have imagined. I looked at Liam. The weakness and pain in his eyes were gone, replaced by a deep, seething hatred. "They took everything from us. We have to take it all back," Liam said through gritted teeth, his hands clenched into fists. "Exactly," I nodded, my gaze sharp. "But we're not just taking back the money. We're taking back our dignity. We'll make them pay for every lie they told, for every act of deceit they committed." In that moment, an unlikely alliance was forged. 2 betrayed souls, 2 broken hearts, found common ground in a burning desire for revenge. We were no longer pitiful victims. We were hunters, and our prey, lost in their fake victory, had no idea that a much larger trap was closing in around them. "So what's our plan?" Liam asked, his voice now calm, his panic replaced by resolve. I looked at him, a cold smile on my lips. "The plan is simple. We'll use their own greed to destroy them. I know what their next big target is. A project that will allow them to launder all their dirty money and officially become successful entrepreneurs. We're going to let them get that project. In fact, we're going to help them get it, only to pull the rug out from under them at the very last second when they least expect it." Liam's eyes lit up. He understood. This wasn't a direct assault. It was a psychological game, a meticulously laid trap. And once the prey was caught, we would be the ones in control. "The Zenith Tower," I said the name, my voice calm but heavy. "It's one of the biggest luxury condominium and commercial real estate projects in the city this year, a prize that every investor is desperate for." "How do you know they're targeting this project?" Liam asked, surprised. "Because the project is being developed by one of my subsidiary companies," I replied, a mysterious smile touching my lips. "And the person in charge of the marketing and event launch for this project is none other than Michael." Liam was stunned. He was beginning to grasp the scale of the game we were about to play. This wasn't petty revenge. This was a war fought on a battlefield where I held all the cards. Michael convinced the board that for a high-profile project like the Zenith Tower, we needed a truly world-class and innovative event partner. And he nominated Jessica's company, Royal Events, I explained. He created a spectacular marketing proposal, a plan so perfect no one could refuse it. And, of course, it came with an equally spectacular budget, $20 million. $20 million, Liam gasped. "Yes," I nodded. "And my guess is, at least half of that would have ended up in the account of their shell company, MJ Equity." This was their final, biggest heist. After this, they would have enough money to disappear, to live like royalty somewhere we could never find them. "Then we have to stop them, now," Liam said urgently. "No," I shook my head. Stopping them now would be too easy. One phone call and Michael would be fired, the contract with Royal Events canceled. But that would be letting them off too lightly. We're not going to stop them. We're going to push them forward. I looked directly into Liam's eyes. We're going to let them sign that contract, but with a few special clauses that we'll add ourselves. My plan was clear. Through a trusted board member, I would have a performance penalty clause added to the contract with Royal Events. If they successfully completed the initial phases of the campaign, they would receive large advance payments. But if they failed at the final, most critical stage, they would have to repay all expenses, plus a massive penalty for damaging the project's reputation. "It's a double-edged sword," I said. "It's a huge carrot to lure them into investing all their money and effort, and it's also a deadly trap. They won't be able to refuse it. Their greed will blind them. But how do we make them fail? Liam asked. That's where you come in, I said. The final stage of the marketing campaign is a massive launch gala held at the construction site itself. The event requires an incredibly complex system of staging, sound, and lighting. And the company responsible for building that system happens to be a longtime partner of yours, isn't that right? Liam understood immediately. He was an excellent construction engineer with deep connections in the industry. Influencing a subcontractor was well within his capabilities. You want me to? I don't want you to do anything illegal. I cut him off. I just want you to ensure that on the day of the event, the system experiences a small, unforeseen technical issue. An issue significant enough to force the cancellation of the entire event at the last minute. A cold smile spread across Liam's face. He knew it was a devastatingly clever move, targeting the most critical element at a point of no return. The rest is up to me, Liam said, his voice confident. I'll make sure that issue happens as naturally as possible. The chessboard was set. The pieces were in place. Michael and Jessica, so engrossed in their own scheme, had no idea they were just pawns in a much larger game. They thought they were the hunters, but in reality, they were the prey. The following days unfolded exactly as planned. Michael, after my warning, didn't dare show up at my hotel again. He poured all his energy into pushing through the contract of the century for the Zenith Tower. He thought this was his only chance to regain his pride and prove his worth. With my discreet help from behind the scenes, the $20 million contract was quickly approved, complete with the penalty clause that no one questioned. With the contract signed, Michael and Jessica were ecstatic. They immediately threw a lavish celebration at a Michelin star restaurant. I found out from a photo Jessica posted online. Though she had cleverly obscured Michael's face, the limited edition watch on his wrist was unmistakable. Her caption read, "The beginning of an empire. Thank you to the man who always has my back." I looked at the photo, my heart completely still. Enjoy it while you can, I thought, because these are the last happy days you'll have. To execute the project, Royal Events had to mobilize all its resources. Jessica invested every penny she had stolen from my company, plus the savings she had taken from Liam, into down payments for vendors, hiring top-tier staff, and launching a massive advertising blitz. She wanted to make the Zenith Tower launch an earth-shattering event, a stepping stone to elevate her company to a new level. They had taken the bait. Now it was time to tighten the line. I called Liam. "Are you ready?" "Been ready for a while," he replied concisely. "The staging contractor is on board. They'll ensure a perfect malfunction." The first economic blow had been launched. A massive financial trap was set. Now, all we had to do was sit back and wait for the prey to walk right into it. In the weeks that followed, Michael and Jessica threw themselves into the Zenith Tower project like moths to a flame. They worked almost non-stop, with late-night meetings and constant travel. On the surface, they were a power couple, talented entrepreneurs building a massive enterprise together. But Liam and I knew the truth. Behind the glamour was a desperate, all-or-nothing gamble. The more they invested, the more they poured their souls into this project, the more bitter the final failure would be. Liam, according to our plan, continued to play the role of the oblivious husband. He went to work and came home as usual, but the atmosphere in their house had changed completely. He told me Jessica was barely ever home. She would return late at night, smelling of expensive perfume and alcohol, only to leave again at dawn. The arguments started. At first, they were over small things, but soon the immense pressure of the project began to expose the cracks in their relationship. "Do you have any idea how hard I worked to get this contract?" Liam recounted a phone argument he overheard between Jessica and Michael. Jessica's voice was tense and frustrated. "All the costs are skyrocketing. The A-list celebrities you promised to book are now demanding double their original fees. Where am I supposed to get that kind of money? Just pay them in advance for now." Michael's voice was equally irritated. "The contract is signed. As soon as Phase 1 is complete, the client will release the next payment. What are you so worried about?" "Worried? Do you know that I've sunk every last dime I have into this? I even used our joint savings. If something goes wrong, we'll lose everything." "Nothing is going to go wrong," Michael snapped. "Everything is under my control. You just do your job and stop complaining all the time." The call ended with Jessica angrily hanging up. Liam told me he could hear the panic growing in her. She had jumped into this gamble blindly, placing all her faith in Michael's promises. But as the first real challenges appeared, that faith began to crumble. As the event date drew closer, their fights became more frequent and intense. The pressure to create a perfect, media frenzy-inducing event was crushing Jessica. She became irritable, suspicious, and perpetually on edge. Meanwhile, Michael remained strangely detached. He acted as the mastermind from afar, offering occasional advice and encouragement, but never getting his hands dirty with the actual work. He left Jessica to deal with the chaotic mess of hundreds of vendors and thousands of tasks. His irresponsibility began to breed resentment in her. She felt like a pawn, the one taking all the risks, while the true beneficiary sat back and reaped the rewards. The breaking point came when a problem arose with the staging contractor, the very one Liam had arranged. They suddenly announced that due to unforeseen safety issues, they needed to alter some of the structural designs, and the additional cost would be substantial. Jessica was furious. The budget was already stretched to its limit, and now this massive new expense. She called Michael, screaming into the phone. "You said everything was under your control. How did this happen? You need to talk to them, make them stick to the original price." "How am I supposed to interfere with that?" Michael replied casually. "Your company signed the contract with them. You have to solve it yourself." What did you just say?" Jessica's voice was filled with disbelief. "You're telling me I have to solve it? Then what's your role in this project? Are you just here to collect the profits?" "Jessica, watch your mouth." Michael's temper flared. "You think you would have gotten this contract without me? Don't be so ungrateful." "Ungrateful? Michael, you are an absolute bastard. What did you promise me? You promised we would build an empire together. And now, you're dumping all the problems on me. You're the CEO of the company. If you don't solve it, who will? You can't expect me, a director at a major corporation, to handle these trivial matters, can you?" The condescension and irresponsibility in his voice was a brutal wake-up call for Jessica. She realized the man she had risked everything for was nothing but a selfish, cowardly user, exploiting her to achieve his own goals. "Fine. You're unbelievable, Michael," Jessica laughed bitterly. "In that case, from now on, stay out of this project. I'll handle it myself, and after this is over, we need to settle our accounts." She hung up. That conversation was a clear sign that their criminal alliance was beginning to disintegrate. The trust was gone. Their relationship, built on greed and lies, was fragile and shattered easily under pressure. Liam told me that after that call, Jessica came home, packed a bag, and left. She didn't say where she was going and wasn't answering her phone. She had vanished, leaving behind a massive project on the verge of collapse. Their ship was sinking, and the rats were starting to flee, but they didn't know that no matter where they ran, they couldn't escape the net we had cast. Jessica's disappearance threw Michael into a full-blown panic. He had lost not only his accomplice but also his shield. The entire weight and responsibility of the Zenith Tower project now fell squarely on his shoulders. He, a man used to pointing fingers and giving orders, was now faced with a tangled mess he had no idea how to unravel. Vendors started calling, demanding payment. The celebrity guests threatened to cancel if they weren't paid in full. The media began to sense something was wrong. Small articles started appearing with suggestive headlines. "Is the Zenith Tower project doomed by event contractors' scandal?" Michael was desperate. He frantically called Jessica, but her phone went straight to voicemail. He went to her company, but the staff said they couldn't reach their CEO either. He went to Liam's house, but Liam just answered coldly, "I'm looking for her too. If you see her, tell her the divorce papers have been filed." Cornered, and with no one left to turn to, Michael thought of one person. The only person he believed could save him from this mess: me. He began his next performance, a role he played so well, the pitiful husband, the victim of a seductress. One evening, as I was working in my hotel suite, the doorbell rang. I checked the security monitor and saw Michael standing outside. He looked worn out and pathetic. His designer suit was wrinkled, his face unshaven, and his eyes were red and sunken from lack of sleep. He was holding a slightly wilted bouquet of roses, standing awkwardly at my door. I didn't open it, just spoke through the intercom. "What do you want, Michael?" "Evelyn, please, can I just talk to you for a minute?" His voice was hoarse and pleading. "Just 5 minutes, I'm begging you." I was silent for a moment. I knew why he was here, but I was curious to see how a man so shameless would play this scene. I opened the door but stood blocking the entrance, making it clear he wasn't welcome inside. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a performance of regret and sorrow. A flawless act. "Evelyn, I was wrong," he began, his voice trembling. "It's all my fault. I'm a horrible person, a complete fool. I was tricked by that witch, by Jessica. She seduced me, painted this picture of wealth and success just to use me. I was blind. I was so stupid to believe her. I'm so sorry. I truly am." He held the bouquet out to me. "Can you forgive me? Can we start over?" "I swear, I promise I will never do it again. I'll cut her off completely. I only love you, Evelyn." I looked at him, at the wilted flowers in his hand, and felt nothing. This act, this script, was so old and cheap. Did he really think I was the same Evelyn from before? The woman who loved him so blindly she would forgive his every mistake? "Are you finished?" I asked, my voice cold. Michael was taken aback by my reaction. He was probably expecting tears, a softening, a chance. "Evelyn, you don't believe me?" he stammered. "I'm telling the truth. It was her. It was Jessica who planned everything. She's the one who pushed me to take money from the company. She said you were too powerful, that you looked down on me. She said a man needs to have his own career. She laid out the whole plan, and I agreed because of my own stupid male pride. Because I wanted to prove myself to you." He was brilliant. In just a few sentences, he had transformed himself from a mastermind into a pitiful victim who was manipulated and used. He shifted all the blame to Jessica, his now absent accomplice. He even cleverly played on my ego, claiming he did it all to impress me. A truly masterful performance, but he forgot one crucial thing. I didn't love him anymore. And when love is dead, all lies, no matter how sweet, are just meaningless noise. I smiled, a smile I knew would send a chill down his spine. "Michael, that was a great performance." "I almost believed you," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "But you know, the worst kind of liar is the one who lies to himself. You blame everything on Jessica. So those contracts you signed, the payments you approved, did she hold your hand and force you to do it? You say you did it to prove yourself to me. So sleeping with her was also to prove yourself?" Every word was a dagger twisting in his gut. His face turned ashen. He had no comeback. "Just go home, Michael," I said, my voice tired. "The show is over. I don't have time to watch you act anymore." I moved to close the door, but he quickly blocked it. "Don't, Evelyn. Don't send me away." He dropped to his knees, grabbing my legs, tears streaming down his face. "I know I was wrong. I'll do anything you want. You can hit me, scream at me, whatever you want. Just please, don't leave me. And please, save the Zenith Tower project. It's everything I've worked for. It's my last chance. If this project fails, I'll lose everything. I'll go to jail. Please, Evelyn, save me this one time. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." Looking at his pathetic form, I no longer felt disgust, just pity. A man who would abandon all self-respect, who would kneel and beg just to save himself. It was pitiful. But I would not be moved. This was the opportunity I had been waiting for. The chance to set the final trap. I looked down at the man kneeling at my feet, his face streaked with tears, a truly pathetic sight. For a fleeting moment, an image of the Michael I first fell in love with flashed in my mind. He had kneeled before me then, too, but it was to propose, holding a ring, his eyes full of sincerity and love. The man before me now was also on his knees, but he was begging for mercy, his eyes filled only with fear and calculation. Time was cruel. It had turned a beautiful love story into a cheap melodrama. I sighed softly and bent down to help him up. "Get up, Michael, don't do this." My voice was no longer harsh, just distant and weary. My actions seemed to give him a glimmer of hope. He scrambled to his feet, grabbing my hands, his eyes lighting up. "Evelyn, does this mean you've forgiven me?" "Forgiveness is no longer the issue," I said, gently pulling my hands away. "But I can give you a chance. One last chance to save your career and to prove your remorse." "What chance? Tell me." "I'll do anything," he replied eagerly, like a drowning man grasping at a piece of driftwood. I turned and walked back into the room, leaving the door open. "Come in. Let's talk." It was the first time I had let him into my war room. He stepped inside, looking around the opulent suite in a daze, probably comparing it to the house where he and Jessica had carried on their affair. I ignored him and went straight to my desk, where the blue file and other evidence lay. "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the sofa. "Before we talk about your chance, I want you to answer one question honestly. The entire plan to embezzle company funds and steal documents, was it all Jessica's idea? Were you just a pawn she used?" I asked, my voice calm, but my eyes bored into him, allowing for no deception. Michael swallowed hard. He hesitated, knowing it was a trick question. If he continued to blame Jessica, I wouldn't believe him. If he admitted his part, he would be sealing his own fate. In the end, fear won. He knew I was the only one who could save him. "No, it wasn't," he mumbled. I was part of it, but it was her idea initially. She said you were too strong, that you looked down on me. She said a man needs his own success. She planned it, and I went along with it." "Good. At least you're admitting to part of it." I nodded, my expression unreadable. "Then here is your chance. You say Jessica tricked you, used you. You say you regret it. Then prove it." "Prove it? How?" "It's simple," I said. "Give me every piece of evidence, every document related to your conspiracy, especially the information on your shell company, MJ Equity. Where the money went, what it was used for, what your plan was after you got the $20 million from the Zenith Tower project. Tell me everything you know. Help me understand the whole picture so I can find it in my heart to forgive you." I intentionally emphasized the words understand and forgive. It was the perfect psychological trap. I was framing his betrayal of his accomplice as an act of redemption, a path to my forgiveness. Michael was stunned. He never expected such a condition. It meant he would have to hand over the evidence against himself and Jessica. It was suicide. But then he looked at my cold face, at the documents on my desk. He realized I already knew too much. Whether he cooperated or not, I would find out eventually. If he helped me, he at least had a chance. If he refused, he would lose everything. "Well?" I raised an eyebrow. "You can't do it? Then I guess your remorse is just an act after all. You can leave. As for the Zenith Tower project, I'll have you replaced first thing tomorrow morning." My words were the final blow. The fear of losing everything overwhelmed any hesitation. He was out of options. Okay, I'll do it," he said, his voice defeated. But you have to promise you'll save me. You have to help me keep my position at the company." "That depends on how sincere you are," I replied, making no firm promises. "You have 24 hours. Bring me everything I need. And don't hide anything. I'll know." Michael staggered to his feet, nodded, and turned to leave. He no longer looked like a dapper director, but a condemned man who had just signed his own death warrant. When the door closed, I let out a long breath. The trap was set. The prey had taken the bait. Michael, in his selfishness and cowardice, would surely sell out Jessica to save himself. He would bring me the evidence I might have spent months trying to find. He would hand-deliver the final weapon I needed to end their entire conspiracy. This game was mine to win. The 24-hour wait felt like an eternity. I didn't leave the hotel, just stayed in my suite, managing company affairs while constantly plotting my next steps. I felt a mix of anticipation and contempt. Anticipation for the final pieces of evidence, and contempt for how easily human nature could turn on its own when cornered. At exactly 8 p.m., the next day, my doorbell rang. It was Michael again, looking even more haggard than before. He carried a briefcase, his eyes sunken, his face gaunt, as if he hadn't slept in days. He said nothing, just walked in, placed the briefcase on the desk, and opened it. Everything is in here," he said, his voice a dry rasp. Inside the briefcase was a thick stack of documents and a laptop. I motioned for him to sit while I began my inspection. I put on a pair of gloves and carefully went through each page. There it was. The articles of incorporation for MJ Equity LLC, the company's bank statements, real estate contracts in the company's name, and most importantly, a detailed, meticulously drafted business plan. I opened his laptop. The digital trail was even clearer. Excel files tracking the money flow, emails with other shell companies, chat logs with Jessica discussing money laundering tactics. He had given me everything, holding nothing back, probably terrified that if he hid even one small detail, I would find out and his efforts would be for nothing. The more I looked, the more I shuddered at the sophistication and cruelty of their plan. It didn't stop at the $20 million from the Zenith Tower project. That was just the beginning. With that capital, they planned to use MJ Equity to acquire several of my own corporation's struggling subsidiaries through shadowy deals. Gradually, they would build their own empire, a parasite feeding off its host. By the time I realized what was happening, it would be too late. They would have control. Their ultimate goal wasn't just money, it was my entire corporation, the one my family had built from the ground up. They wanted to oust me, to turn me into a powerless figurehead, or even push me out of my own company entirely. And then I found it. The final, undeniable smoking gun. A Word document named Strategic Partnership Agreement, saved in a hidden folder. With trembling hands, I opened it. The contents made me hold my breath. It was a contract, signed between Michael Hayes and Jessica Moore. It clearly outlined their roles and profit sharing in the planned corporate takeover. Michael would be responsible for manipulating internal decisions and leaking confidential information. Jessica would manage the shell company and execute external transactions. Profits would be split 60/40 in Michael's favor, and at the bottom of the document were their digital signatures, legally certified. They had been so arrogant, so confident they would never be caught, that they had signed their own confession. I gave you everything," Michael said, his voice shaking, pulling me from my thoughts. You'll keep your promise, right? You'll help me?" I slowly closed the laptop and looked up at him. My eyes were no longer cold, just filled with an infinite pity. "Help you?" I repeated, my voice soft. "After all this, you really think you can go back to being a director? You think everyone will just forget that you conspired with your mistress to destroy the company? But I cooperated with you," he stammered. "Without me, you never would have gotten any of this." "That's true," I nodded. "And for your cooperation, I'll give you some sincere advice. Take whatever savings you have left, leave this city, and start a new life somewhere far away. It's the only way out for you." Michael's face went white. He finally understood. I never had any intention of saving him. I had used him, just as he and Jessica had used me. Turnabout is fair play. You tricked me," he hissed, the fear in his eyes turning to rage. "I didn't trick you. I taught you a lesson." I stood up and walked to the door. "Now, please leave. And thank you for these valuable documents. They will be very useful at the upcoming trial." "How dare you?" he shot up, lunging toward me, but then he stopped. He knew he had nothing left. The evidence against him was even more damning than the evidence against Jessica. If he made a move, he would be the one to suffer the most severe consequences. He collapsed back into the chair and let out a crazed laugh, a sound full of bitterness and despair. He had lost completely. He had single-handedly buried his own future out of weakness and stupidity. He sold out his partner only to realize he was just another pawn in a much larger game. I said nothing more, just held the door open and waited for him to leave. The war was over. All the evidence was in my hands. It was time for the curtain to fall. Tomorrow, there would be an emergency board meeting, and it would be the final stage for Michael and Jessica's tragic play. The next morning, the corporate boardroom was filled with a tense, formal atmosphere. Every key member of the board, every major shareholder, the people who held the fate of the corporation in their hands, was present. They had been summoned to an emergency meeting for a vague reason, to discuss matters of internal security and corporate risk. No one knew what was about to happen. Michael was there too. He sat in his seat as Director of Business Development, but he looked like a ghost, his eyes empty, his face ashen. He had clearly not slept. He was here not out of duty, but out of a desperate, final shred of hope that I might show him mercy. Pitiful. The meeting began. As vice chairwoman of the board, I presided. I stood at the podium and scanned the room, my gaze resting on Michael for a single, cold, emotionless second before moving on. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice clear and steady. "I have called this emergency meeting today not to report on quarterly earnings or financial metrics, but to tell you a story. A story of trust and betrayal." A murmur went through the room. People exchanged confused glances. "This story begins 2 years ago," I continued, "when our corporation began to significantly increase its investment in marketing and events. We entrusted enormous budgets to a talented director, hoping he would deliver the best possible results for our company." I looked toward Michael. He stared down at the table, refusing to meet anyone's eye. "And that director, Mr. Michael Hayes, did not disappoint us," I said, emphasizing the word disappoint. "He brought us flawless contracts and high-profile campaigns. But what we didn't know was that behind that success was a perfectly concealed conspiracy." I signaled to Maya, my assistant. The large screen behind me lit up. The first piece of evidence appeared, a flowchart of the money trail for the contracts with Royal Events. Red arrows clearly showed funds moving from our corporation through Royal Events and into a third entity, MJ Equity LLC. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, pointing at the diagram, "this is how our money was used. Over $9 million vanished from our budget, not for marketing, but to enrich a ghost company. A front set up by our own Director of Business Development and his mistress, Miss Jessica Moore." The room erupted. Whispers and shocked gasps filled the air as angry, astonished eyes turned to Michael. He sat frozen in his chair, trembling. But I wasn't finished. "You might think this is a simple case of embezzlement. It is not. It is much, much worse." The second piece of evidence appeared on screen, the top-secret business plan I had found at Jessica's house. "This is our proprietary data, and it was leaked. Not just to anyone, but to our direct competitor, and the person who leaked it was my husband, Director Michael Hayes." The outrage in the room was now palpable. Several of the older shareholders, men who had been with the company since its founding, shot to their feet, pointing at Michael and yelling, "Traitor! We trusted you!" "And this," I said, my voice sharp and loud, "is the final piece of evidence, the undeniable proof of their entire conspiracy." The screen displayed the strategic partnership agreement, complete with Michael and Jessica's signatures. Their plan to take over the corporation, to steal its assets, was laid out in meticulous detail. At this point, no one could remain seated. The boardroom descended into chaos. Cries of "fire him," "press charges," and "traitor" echoed from all sides. Michael, cornered and with nothing left to lose, finally snapped. He leaped to his feet, screaming like a wounded animal. "It was her! It was all Evelyn's fault! She set me up! She's a manipulative snake!" He started to charge the podium, but the corporate security team, whom I had positioned in advance, moved in instantly. 2 large guards in black uniforms quickly subdued him, pinning his arms behind his back. He struggled and cursed, but it was hopeless. I raised the microphone, my voice ringing out over the noise, clear and authoritative. "I hereby declare that effective immediately, Mr. Michael Hayes is terminated from all positions within this corporation. All criminal activities committed by Mr. Hayes and his associates will be handed over to the police for a full investigation and prosecution to the fullest extent of the law. Furthermore," I continued, "I would also like to announce that I have filed for divorce from Mr. Michael Hayes." The play was over. In front of everyone, in the very boardroom where he once held so much power, Michael had been stripped bare, his career, his reputation, his family all gone. The security guards dragged him away like a common criminal. As he passed me, he gave me a look of pure hatred and despair. I met his gaze calmly. This was the price he had to pay for his greed and his betrayal. Immediately after the meeting, the police arrived. They sealed Michael's office and confiscated all related documents. An arrest warrant was issued for Jessica, who was still in hiding. The drama had ended. Now it was time for the law to take its course. The downfall of Michael and Jessica was swifter and more absolute than anyone could have imagined. The scandal, nearly $10 million embezzled, and a plot to take over a major corporation sent shockwaves through the business community. The press had a field day. Sensational headlines splashed across the front pages of every major newspaper. Corporate director and mistress in multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme. The dramatic boardroom takedown by Vice Chairwoman Evelyn Hayes. The dark secret behind Royal Events' meteoric rise. Every detail of their lives was dredged up and put on public display. They became symbols of greed and deceit, targets of public scorn. The reputation they had built on lies turned to ash. After a few days on the run, Jessica was apprehended by police while trying to cross the border into Canada. In her mugshot, she looked haggard and broken, a far cry from the glamorous CEO she once portrayed. Faced with irrefutable evidence, both Michael and Jessica confessed. Their trial was a public spectacle. I didn't attend. I had no desire to see their faces again. The law would handle it. For crimes of fraud, embezzlement, and corporate espionage, Michael and Jessica were each sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. All their illegally obtained assets, MJ, equity, real estate, luxury cars, were seized to pay restitution. They had lost everything, not just money and careers, but the best years of their lives, now to be spent behind bars. It was a steep price for greed and betrayal. After the dust settled, Liam finalized the divorce. He asked for nothing, wanting only to sever all ties with the woman who had deceived him. He sold the mansion in Greenwich, a place tainted with painful memories, and moved with his daughter to a new city. His life slowly returned to a quiet normalcy. My corporation faced its own challenges. The scandal had damaged our reputation and our stock price. But with decisive leadership and a strong restructuring plan, I gradually righted the ship. I proved to everyone, and to myself, that I was not just the chairman's daughter. I was a true leader, capable of navigating the company through any storm. One afternoon, after a long meeting, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. It was Liam. "Evelyn, are you free?" I was wondering if we could meet up for a bit. We met at the same quiet bookstore cafe where our alliance had been formed. The atmosphere was the same, but our moods were completely different. The tension and pain were gone, replaced by the quiet peace of survivors. "Thank you," Liam said, breaking the silence. "Without you, I might still be living in a lie." "You helped me a great deal, too," I replied. "We were just helping ourselves." We sat quietly for a while, watching the light rain fall outside. "What are your plans now?" he asked. "I'll keep working." "There's still a lot to do to rebuild," I said. "And you?" "I'm thinking of taking a long leave of absence, take my daughter traveling. She needs a change of scenery, and so do I," he said, a sad smile on his face. "That sounds wonderful," I smiled back. "Go somewhere beautiful, wash away all the bad memories." The brief meeting left me feeling lighter. I realized that even after being betrayed by the people I loved most, I was not alone. I still had good, true friends. The storm had passed, leaving clear skies in its wake. All scores were settled. The guilty had paid their price. Now, it was time for Liam and me to start a new chapter. A chapter free of lies and betrayal, filled only with peace and new hope. 1 year after that fateful trial, my life was entirely new. The storm had left scars, but it had also washed away everything old and rotten, revealing a clear, peaceful horizon. Under my leadership, the corporation had not only recovered, but was thriving. We had restructured the entire system, cut out the dead weight, and rebuilt on a foundation of transparency and integrity. Our reputation was restored, and our stock price was higher than ever. I had proven myself, not to anyone else, but to me. I was no longer living in my father's shadow or standing behind a successful husband. I was Evelyn Hayes, an independent, powerful businesswoman who had reclaimed everything that was rightfully hers. I moved back into the mansion. At first, I had planned to sell it, to erase every bad memory. But then I realized the house was not at fault. The people who had lived in it were. I decided to keep it and renovate it completely to my own taste. I painted the walls in shades of white and soft gray, creating a minimalist, modern space filled with light. I replaced all the old furniture and redesigned the garden. The house was transformed, becoming my true sanctuary, a place of peace and freedom. Occasionally, I would hear news of the old crowd. Michael and Jessica were still in prison, paying for their mistakes. I felt no hatred, no satisfaction, only a detached indifference. Their lives no longer had any connection to mine. As for Liam, after a long trip around the country with his daughter, Anna, he returned to the city. He didn't go back to his old job, but started his own architectural firm. With his talent and integrity, his business quickly became successful. We kept in touch, not often, but enough to know that the other was doing well. We had become close friends, the kind who could share anything without having to say a word. There was a deep understanding between us, the bond of two souls who had weathered the same storm. One weekend afternoon, Liam called me. "Evelyn, are you busy? Anna and I are at the park near your place. She keeps insisting she wants to see the beautiful Miss Evelyn." I smiled. Anna was an adorable little girl who had taken a real liking to me. "Of course. Give me a few minutes." I went to the park and saw Liam and Anna on the swings. He was wearing a simple t-shirt and looked younger, more relaxed. When Anna saw me, she squealed with delight and ran to give me a hug. "Miss Evelyn!" We walked through the park together, the golden afternoon sun casting long shadows on the leaf-strewn path. Anna chattered away about school, while Liam walked beside me, occasionally smiling at me. It was a warm, gentle smile. "How's work been?" he asked. "Very good. And yours?" "It's going well. I have a few exciting projects lined up," he said. We talked about work, about our children, about our hopes for the future. The conversation was light and peaceful. As the sun began to set, we sat on a bench overlooking the lake. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. "Evelyn," Liam said suddenly, his voice a little hesitant. Have you ever thought about starting over?" I turned to look at him, my heart skipping a beat. I knew what he meant. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "The old wounds have healed, but the scars are still there. I'm afraid." "I understand," he nodded, his eyes full of empathy. "Me too. But I think everyone deserves a second chance at happiness, especially people like us, who have been through so much." He said nothing more, just quietly reached out and gently took my hand. His hand was so warm, I didn't pull away. We sat there like that, silently watching the sunset. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if we would walk it together. But in that moment, with his hand in mine, I felt a sense of peace and trust that I hadn't felt in a very long time. The nightmare was truly over. The past was behind me. Ahead was a new road, a new journey. And this time, perhaps I wouldn't have to walk it alone.